This week, as we're telling you, gearing up to Thursday, when it's officially 1 year since the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic. The stress of staying safe, staying put, has put pressure on our relationships. Now, we don't have hard data in Canada yet, in part because the courts closed down. But there is evidence that divorce rates are rising in the United States. Legal Templates released a study that the number of people in the U.S. expressing interest in getting divorced already up 34% by just April of 2020, so just a month in. The study found newer couples were more likely to file. 20% of couples who'd been married for 5 months or less sought divorce in early 2020, and that's compared to about 11% in the same time period the year previous. So that gives you some American data as a starting point for a conversation this morning with the Canadian perspective, the personal perspective of lawyer Russell Alexander, who's with us, the founder and senior partner at Russell Alexander Collaborative Family Lawyers. He's a host of a podcast. He's the author as well, Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Divorce, and he's in Lindsay, Ontario. Good morning.
Good morning, Heather. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here with us so early this morning. What are you seeing in your own practice this year, Mr. Alexander?
Our practice mirrors the data we're getting out of the U.S. We're probably up about 30%. We've seen a real spike, especially after March and April of 2020. There was a few weeks where everything shut down. And then as the pandemic has progressed, people are finding more and more reasons to get divorced, unfortunately.
I want to talk about those reasons, but up 30%. I mean, that's a big. Have you had to change your business model or just how you do your work to deal with that?
Right. We hired 5 new lawyers. We opened a second office in Toronto just to help us with the workload. We've had to increase our staff, which is fortunate because there's a lot of industries that are really hurting because of the pandemic, but unfortunately, divorce lawyers, at least our office, has been quite busy.
Okay, I have a lot of quick questions. Number one, who is on the phone? Are these new clients or are they already existing clients who just want to sort of move things along more quickly?
We've got a mix. There's some backlog, obviously, because the court effectively shut down for a few months and it's slowly reopening. So we have a bit of a bottleneck. We have new couples. We have couples who have been married and on their second marriages that are getting divorced. So it's all across the spectrum is what we're seeing.
And is it men or women? And is it any particular group? I'm thinking, maybe frontline workers. What are you noticing? Any trends within the group?
Well, not necessarily. I think it's pretty much across the board. Usually we're seeing a lot of families with children that are under increased pressure. The kids are homeschooling. One or both spouses may be working from home. So what would ordinarily be a regular bump in a relationship is amplified during the pandemic. And unfortunately, that's leading to what I think is an increase in divorce in Canada.
Okay, so that gets us into some of the factors then, because I was going to ask from the people who are approaching you, are they making it clear that they're seeking a divorce and the reason is COVID related?
Well, I don't know if they'd specifically say it's related to COVID. It's certainly, the lockdowns, the added pressures from working from home. Everybody's out of their routines, their diets changed, their exercise routines changed. Cabin fever, right? We see this a lot with older couples when one couple retires or one spouse retires and then both spouses are at home. They realize after spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with each other, they just don't like their spouse and they get divorced. So we've always seen that with retiring couples. Now we're seeing that trend move into all the other couples as a result of the pandemic.
That's really interesting, the tension points, the whole range. What about, within couples, we've been hearing over the past year that maybe individuals have different approaches, how careful they need to be with dealing with the pandemic restrictions. Can they let the kids see grandparents? Are there different parenting styles that are coming to a head and that maybe are leading to breakups?
There are, and this is new battlegrounds for spouses that are on the verge of divorce or going through a divorce. So we have, disputes over in-person learning, whether the children should be going to school in person or doing remote learning. So lots of parents disagree over that. We have disputes over social bubbles. Many examples include vacation, cottage rentals in the summertime, or Christmas gatherings. There's disputes over how many family members should be involved in that. And I think we're going to see in the next few months increasing disputes over vaccines. Not everybody agrees with vaccines. Most parents do. But if the parents can't make a decision as to whether or not to vaccinate their child, those disputes are going to end up in court, and the judge is going to need to decide the matter.
My goodness, you're really seeing it all of the things people are dealing with coming to a head. Do you think these are relationships that might have broken up anyway, that this has just been a catalyst, or is it all caused by COVID tension?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing, Heather, is COVID sort of amplifies everything. So a lot of these decisions parents wouldn't be facing unless there was a pandemic. You know, sending your child to school, that's a pretty basic decision parents agree on. Social bubbles, vaccines, these are all new decisions parents are facing. But because we're all out of our routines, we're all starting to get a little bit of cabin fever, we're not exercising the way we usually would, these small issues become amplified and quite large and can form the basis of ultimately a decision to leave your spouse. So I think a lot of it is attributed directly to the pandemic. There's going to be people divorcing whether or not there's a pandemic, but we're seeing the numbers increase, I think, because of these added pressures on relationships.
Sure. And then the whole process, separating and then going through the divorce. We mentioned the courts are closed down. I mean, technology really comes into play. How has the pandemic changed the process?
That's a great question. Courts were effectively closed. They started slowly opening up in July of last summer. So now we're seeing the onset of what we call Zoom divorce. So people would be on the couch watching Netflix in their track pants and then log in their device to go to court for their Zoom divorce. So this creates a whole new series of issues for a lot of people. The technology is new for a lot of people. There's the issue of decorum, right? Having a respect for the justice system. That's sort of fallen off the rails. We've seen a lot of funny stories about people going to court. And unfortunately, Heather, we're seeing some people getting left behind. So poor families who don't have the technology, victims of domestic violence who might not be able to safely access the justice system. These are all new challenges that we're facing with this concept of a Zoom divorce.
Oh my goodness. And as you say, given vaccine and given the fact that the pandemic continues, likely continue in the longer term into 2021. What advice do your associates give, Russell, in terms of people who call in seeking a divorce? Do you give them advice first before they go down that road?
Right. We get lots of people calling us for what we call pre-separation legal advice. So they may have had to dispute with their spouse, but they want to know what their rights and their obligations are. Lots of people like to plan things out, including planning out their divorce. There's recent changes to the Divorce Act, Heather, that require people to consider alternative dispute resolution services before rushing off to court. So we're encouraging a lot of our clients to look at collaborative practice, settling all the issues that they can outside of the court system before going to see a judge.
Or even get counseling and see if it's something that can be worked out, I guess, worked through the pandemic. Maybe it's just bringing it to a head. Well, we're starting a day focusing on relationships, and I feel like it's a bit of a sad note, but listen, it sounds like you're really helping people navigate this new territory. Thanks a lot for your time this morning and telling us all about this.
Thank you, Heather. Have a great morning.
You too. Russell Alexander is in Lindsay, Ontario.